In this video, we're diving into two of the most talked about crime cases involving family abuse, the Menendez Brothers and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. At first glance, these cases seem pretty different, but they actually have a deep, shared connection. Both of these stories reveal how family abuse can impact children in extreme, sometimes shocking, ways. So if you're into true crime and exploring the why behind these headlines, stick around. And before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Alright, let's jump in with a question. What do the Menendez brothers and Gypsy Rose Blanchard have in common? At first, it might look like these are two completely unrelated stories. The Menendez case goes back to the 1980s, with a wealthy Beverly Hills family, two brothers, and the murder of both parents. Gypsy Rose's story, it's more recent, and it involves a young girl with a sick history under her mother's tight, obsessive control. But at the core, both cases share something very dark: family abuse and manipulation that created a kind of prison for those involved. This abusive environment drove both the Menendez brothers and Gypsy Rose to commit extreme actions to find freedom. Let's start by diving deeper into Lyle and Eric Menendez's background. So, Lyle and Eric were raised in a wealthy family, but their lives were far from picture perfect. From the outside, their father, Jose Menendez, appeared successful, driven, and provided a lavish lifestyle. But inside the home, things were reportedly much darker. Lyle and Eric claimed that behind the doors of their Beverly Hills mansion, their father's strict control dominated everything. Their entire lives were micromanaged, from their friendships to even what they ate and wore. Their father expected nothing but perfection, and he wasn't gentle in enforcing it. According to their testimony, it went beyond control. They alleged he abused them physically, emotionally, and even sexually. For years, they kept quiet about what was going on. And it makes you wonder, why didn't they tell someone? But this silence is actually common in abusive households. Many children are too scared or ashamed to speak up. By 1989, things had escalated to the point where the brothers claimed they felt trapped. In their minds, ending their parents' lives seemed like the only way out. It's hard for most of us to imagine being pushed to that point. And that's where the real question lies. How did they get there? Now, let's switch to Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Gypsy's story is different, but equally intense. Growing up, Gypsy was led to believe she was gravely ill. Her mother, Dee Dee, convinced everyone around them that Gypsy had countless medical issues: leukemia, muscular dystrophy, even brain damage. Dee Dee had what's known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This is a mental health condition where a caregiver exaggerates or even causes illness in someone else to gain attention or sympathy. Because of this, Gypsy underwent multiple surgeries, took numerous medications, and was kept isolated from the world. Imagine for a moment what that must have felt like for Gypsy. She had no idea what a normal life even looked like. She spent her whole life being told she was sick and dependent on her mother, with little to no freedom. And because her mother controlled everything, she couldn't escape. Eventually, Gypsy met a man online, and together, they conspired to end Dee Dee's life. In Gypsy's eyes, this was her only way out. So again, we come to a question: was Gypsy fully responsible for what happened? Or was she another victim of her environment? Let's break down what might have been going on in the minds of Lyle, Eric, and Gypsy. For the Menendez brothers, years of abuse and control created a feeling of helplessness. This is actually common in cases of prolonged abuse. Victims feel there's no way out, which can sometimes lead to desperate, extreme decisions. Now, Gypsy's situation was different because her entire identity was manipulated by her mother. Imagine being told your whole life that you're sick and dependent, without any other reality. Gypsy was isolated from other people and had no concept of freedom or choices outside her mother's world. And let's address the obvious question here: couldn't they just leave? For most of us, walking away seems like an option. But when a person has been controlled and conditioned for so long, leaving feels impossible. Abuse can really twist a person's perception of freedom and make them feel trapped. Now let's look at what happened in court. Both the Menendez brothers and Gypsy Rose ended up being convicted. But how did the public react? Opinions were, and still are, divided. Some see the Menendez brothers and Gypsy as criminals who committed horrific acts. Others see them as victims pushed to the edge by years of abuse and manipulation. These cases raise a question that society still wrestles with today. Can family trauma justify crime? Does being abused excuse committing violence, or does it simply explain it? And how do we balance justice for the victims with understanding the abuse that may have led to these actions? Now, here's where their stories diverge. Gypsy Rose, who served a 10-year sentence, was released in 2023. She's now free, rebuilding her life after years of control and manipulation. But for the Menendez brothers, it's a different story. They're still behind bars, serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Even decades later, they remain in prison, fighting to be understood and hoping for a new trial. So while Gypsy got a second chance, the Menendez brothers are still paying the ultimate price for their choices. It's fascinating to see how much these cases make us think about the impact of family on our lives. Think about it. Families are supposed to be our support systems, right? But when the family becomes a source of control and abuse, it can push children to extremes. So what's your take? Do you think that Lyle, Eric, and Gypsy are victims of their environments, or do they bear full responsibility for their actions? These are tough questions, and everyone's got a different perspective. So I'd love to hear what you think. Are the Menendez brothers and Gypsy Rose victims or perpetrators? Can family trauma ever justify such extreme actions? Let's get a discussion going in the comments. And if you found this topic interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more true crime and deep dives into cases like this. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.